My dear friends, near or far, wherever you are, welcome to this first episode of Shakespeare's Views on the News. Historically speaking, this is not the first episode of Shakespeare's Views on the News. It is rather the continuation, or possibly the rebirth of a program with the same title, that is Shakespeare's Views on the News, that was broadcast here in Portland, Oregon during the second decade of the 21st century, to be emphatically historical. Therefore, Shakespeare Views on the News, we could say with accuracy, is a continuation and an update of an old program, in which some news or events of the day are interpreted under a Shakespearean light, or rather, they are revisited and commented upon by finding in what Shakespearean play, poem, or sonnet we may locate the lines that may better capture the essence of an event. And here is an example bordering with the trivial, but only used to illustrate the idea. Few people in the world, even those for whom Shakespeare is but a name, heard sometimes, somewhere, or said by someone, may not remember, or rather, they know the line to be or not to be, that is the question. Those who have read the script or watched the play know that it was Hamlet who uttered these words while he was questioning and meditating on the meaning and on the tragic sense of life. In the same spirit, the intent of Shakespeare Views on the News is to select some current news, each in its own way representative of the spirit of the moment, the Zeitgeist, as the Germans call it. And the program connects the event to one or more, depending on the import of the news, connects the event to one or more Shakespearean lines. What is the objective of all this, one may ask? Very simple. One of the uses of poetry, and in this program the poetry is a Shakespeare, is to help or guide or encourage us to examine current events, simple or sublime, tremendous or trivial, hopeful or depressing, examining them from an alternative point of view. A point of view that may capture the spirit of that event and at the same time transcend it. That is, seeing beyond what the raw chronicle may show and placing it, the event that is, placing into a context more general and universal than the fact of itself. Now, what gave me the idea of interpreting day-to-day life events from a Shakespearean point of view, or seeing them through a Shakespearean lens? What gave me this idea? Nothing striking, startling, stunning, spectacular, or astounding. I describe the principle or the philosophy of this idea, that is, looking at the world or to the world through a Shakespearean lens. Yes, I describe it in the only situational Shakespearean dictionary ever produced, this one, in which over 10,000 daily life situations are connected to the appropriate and pertinent Shakespearean quote. The dictionary is titled Your Daily Shakespeare, an arsenal of verbal weapons to drive your friends into action and your enemies into despair. The other associated book is titled Shakespeare in Pictures and is a combination of printer book and internet file. Its goal is to facilitate the memorization of Shakespearean lines. The printed part of the book guides the reader towards this ability via a process that I have called mnemonic frames. And I will not go into this here. The internet part displays 100 Shakespearean quotes converted into pictures, or rather into mnemonic frames. My formal educational background is neither in literature nor in poetry. By formal training, I am, or I should say I was, actually an engineer. And so many years ago, I was employed by a Portland, Oregon company called Tektronix. I had been hired thanks to a thesis in which I demonstrate the use of this company's Tektronix, that is, the company's signature product, which was, or rather was called oscilloscopes. With great simplification, we can say that an oscilloscope is an instrument that converts electricity and electrical signals into visual signals and images, so that the behavior, the power, the type, and the characteristics of electrical and electronic signals can be verified, examined, and fitted to their respective uses. But to continue with the narrative, and to quote Shakespeare, there is a history in all men's lives, figuring the natures of the times deceased, the which observed, a man may prophesy with the near aim of the main chance of things as yet not come to life, which in their seeds and weak beginnings lie intreasured. And that is from the play Henry IV, Part 1, by the way. Now, how did the idea of Shakespeare's views on the news came about? Quite simple, actually, and nothing extraordinary. While working for this company, Tektronix that is, I was their international marketing manager, working out of the island of Guernsey in the Channel Islands, off the coast of France, where my employer had its European headquarters. My work involved extensive travel through Europe and the Middle East, an area, especially the Middle East, in which Tektronix products were beginning to be in high demand, and therefore an adequate organization had to be established. All this involved extensive travel, which began with a 1-hour live flight from Guernsey to London, and then from London to the various other destinations. I never had great enthusiasm for in-flight magazines, and I started bringing with me one or more Shakespearean plays, one play for each trip almost. And this represents my entry, for lack of a better word, my entry into the world of Shakespeare. After 8 years with this company, I decided to change employment and founded my own computer company. I started it from the proverbial nothing, and equally without the proverbial investors who invest in what they are usually called startups. The first product in itself was good, but the company was unknown, and given that when starting from nothing there is equally nothing to lose, in order to promote the first product, I decided to interject here and there various Shakespearean quotations pertinent to the subject at hand, but such as to possibly trigger some curiosity among the readers and motivate them to know more about the product. This was definitely a novelty as far as promotion was concerned. I mean, using Shakespeare as a promotional device. The promotional material caught the attention of a journalist in the New York Times who bought one of my products and wrote a good and praising article about it. And this happened around Christmas time of 1984, a year which, to think about it now, coincided with the title of Orwell's famous and iconic book, 1984. Anyway, that article captured the interest of the readers who purchased that first product of mine in large numbers, at least for me, considering the widespread circulation, of course, of the New York Times. And since when one tries to shrink the accomplishments of many years into an hourglass, to quote Shakespeare in King Henry V, and setting modesty aside for the moment, for the sake of poetry, I show here what that first product looked like and how yours truly looked over 40 years ago. This segment was aired during the evening news in a now distant evening of 1985, 40 years ago, where I succinctly describe the product in question.
We have that story in today's business. This little machine re-inks computer printer ribbons so they can be used again and again. It's called Mac-Inker, and its name was inspired by the popular fast food chain.
We were hoping one day to be able to say somewhere, or printed, or maybe published, over 50,000 sold.
But 130,000 Mac-Inkers have already been sold. There are Mac-Inkers for cartridges, spool-to-spool ribbons, even multiple color ribbons. A little motor pulls the ribbon, we used a white one for demonstration purposes, through the ink pool. The two lines of ink will diffuse throughout the fabric. So the computer user who might otherwise spend an average of $10 for a new printer cartridge can now re-ink the old one for about 5 cents.
If there are many printers in an organization, the savings could go up to tens of thousands, to hundreds of thousands, or theoretically to the millions.
Texas Instruments, for example, claims Mac-Inker saves its firm $34,000 a year. And if you're wondering if the machine actually works, well, the ribbon cartridge used to type this letter has been re-inked 74 times during the last 5 years. Mac-Inker, manufactured in North Bend and assembled here in Portland, goes for about $60, but its makers say it's impossible to put a price tag on its potential.
As far as we can say, dot matrix printing will continue for a long while, so the potential is in principle unlimited, and in practice, as I said, limited only by the awareness perhaps of the product.
And that's today's business. Also, we're told David Brinkley of television fame was one of the first individuals to buy one of those Mac-Inkers.
Oh, he strikes me as a pretty thrifty guy. That makes sense. Steve Arena in Sports Tonight.
Many other products followed. Then, after 30 years, almost 30 years, I decided it was time to do something else. Now, not everybody may agree on this, but as the poet Alexander Pope said in one of his poems, true wit is nature to advantage dressed, what oft was thought but never so well expressed. It is not my intent to emphasize the obvious, nor I claim any special merit, but words that are unusual but well structured and at the same time pleasant to the ear and sometimes amusing, these words tend to leave a mark in the memory. And it is natural that if our memory brings back to mind the word that we heard, equally and often the memory brings back to mind both the subject that the words are connected with as well as the speaker. Let me refer to a quote and a much more recent and yet historical example. If you hear the words, "Think not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country," the mind associates or may associate those words with President Kennedy and so forth. Now, all this is dramatically obvious and even trivial, and yet, many, if not most, do not think, at least consciously, about the power of words, possibly and partly because they may not think of being good enough for the task, or that it is the content of words that counts rather than the way by which the content is expressed or similar thought. Whatever the case may be, after retiring from my engineering life, as I said, I decided to extract from all the notes and the scripts produced and from the presentations delivered for the products of my company, extract the Shakespearean quotation that I had used, plus all the others that, in my way, could lend themselves to be used to effect in various occasions. And, more important, to structure the quotations in a way, for the dictionary, that I thought would be helpful to whoever must prepare a presentation, a speech, or even a letter. And by so doing, spicing up his or her presentation with words that leave a mark in the mind, so to speak. A mark that is both effective and elegant, which is one characteristic, if characteristic is the right word, a characteristic of Shakespeare's poetry and plays. And this, in a nutshell, is a history of the dictionary, your daily Shakespeare, an arsenal of verbal weapons to drive your friends into action and your enemies into despair. If you connect to my website, yourdailysshakespeare.com, you will find a practical presentation of your Daily Shakespeare dictionary, of the dictionary, and of its use, as well a presentation on its sequel titled Shakespeare in Pictures, which, as I said, is a combination of a classical printed book and an internet file in which 100 Shakespearean quotes have been or are converted into pictures, one picture for every quote, with an easy method to memorize the quotes and imprint them, so to speak, imprint them in your mind. The idea behind the Shakespeare in Pictures is, yes, to help memorize the quotes, to use them in speech and in writing, but equally, the pictures, that is, constitute a helpful and amusing exercise to keep your memory sharp via discipline that is easy on the mind, on the purse, and on the body. Why the body, you may ask? Quite simple. The method is free of charge and, unlike many medicines, has no side effects on mind or body. Besides, as I said, the method is amusing, and as Shakespeare himself says in The Taming of the Shrew, no profit grows where is no pleasure taken. No profit grows where is no pleasure taken. In summary, given the tone of our times, I like to think of my Your Daily Shakespeare dictionary and of its use as the intelligent answer to artificial intelligence, or, to comply with a style that prefers acronyms to words, the IA to AI. In the time remaining for this episode, much of which time was dedicated to an introduction to the series and a brief history of its antecedents, I will select as an example a Shakespearean quotation applicable to a recent episode that has occupied much space, especially online, on the various popular venues such as YouTube or similar. Looking at the available statistics and viewers' numbers, much television time, at least on YouTube and similar channels, has been dedicated to the saga of Harry and Meghan, the royal, or now ex-royal couple who allegedly left the secure shores of England, exchanging the society of royalty for the society of the spectacle. As it is well known, this couple has done whatever possible to prominently appear in a host of shows, events, commemoration, TV appearances, and television series, some of which dedicated to cooking, to gardening, to fashion, and similar. And, as we equally know, there is a border between vanity and taste, between show and substance, between results and ridicule. The clip extracted was produced by a clever video maker commentator called George the Giant and gives direct, I would say almost dramatic, evidence of ridicule. It goes without saying that exposure is necessary for success, if not else because things in motion sooner catch the eye than what not stirs, that comes from Troilus and Cressida. But there is an undefined border between taste and tastelessness, between restraint and exaggeration, between measure and excess. A border and a limit which, when exceeded, achieves effects opposite to those or to the ones hoped for. And as Shakespeare says in King Richard II, violent fires soon burn out themselves. Small showers last long, but sudden storms are short. He tires betimes who spurs too fast betimes. With eager feeding, the food doth choke the feeder. Light vanity, insatiate cormorant, consuming means soon preys upon itself. An analogy and a notion that currently seem to be played out in real life and for all to see by Harry and Meghan, a couple that, famous at the beginning, have now become perhaps only notorious thanks to their exploits of questionable taste, to be kind in judgment.
Gosh, I work so hard. Wow. I appreciate what hard work looks like. I like working hard. And I'm still working hard. Yeah. It means we're working on replenishment and what are the next SKUs and what's the next tranche of products and what's the timing on that. And wow. Writing the newsletters. Wow. And writing the social media captions. Wow. And making sure that all that feels in line. Wow. And what's the cadence of it? And wow. What's the photography that we want to do? And what do I want to wear for those shoots? While also editing all the time-coded notes for season 2 of With Love, Meghan.
Thank you for watching. See you next time, and may all the number of the stars give light to your fair way.